Peter. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to be here, Peter. I really appreciate it, and look forward to a great conversation. You know, I'm here to tell you something that you may or may not know, but I'm going to say it anyway. Innovation of technology is actually the easy part of creating a billion-dollar business. Now that sounds counterintuitive because as an engineer myself, you know, we all tend to get excited about the breakthrough inventions and then what come from that in terms of innovation. But I will tell you, you can have the coolest, greatest product if the timing isn't right, or your go-to-market isn't right, or you're not well-funded, you will not translate that into a billion-dollar business. So I'm going to work from the assumption that there is lots of talent and there's lots of brain power and will continue to be around for many years to come that will innovate great products. The key question I'm going to talk to you about today is how do you turn those into successful billion-dollar businesses? Now, I'm an entrepreneur myself, and from what Peter told me, there's quite a few entrepreneurs in the room here. I'd like to ask a quick question. Who of you have created a successful billion-dollar business? Grew something from nothing to $1 billion? Okay, I always ask that question, and even if I'm in front of a group of 500 CXOs, maybe one or two hands will go up. Who has been associated or has been part of a company that went from nothing to $1 billion? A few more folks in the room. Okay, great. So, this is not an easy problem, and few people actually in their career get the opportunity to go through that. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we do that at Cisco. First of all, at Cisco, innovation is key to our culture. Each one of our employees walk around with a badge that really has one of the key aspects of our culture, innovation. Cisco, of course, has been playing a key part in building the internet. Our products are used 80% of you can think of it, 80% of the fabric of the internet is made up of Cisco's products, routers, switches, etc. And so it's been a great culture. I've been there for almost 15 years. I was not acquired. I was hired into the first acquisition Cisco made. And I've seen the company go from 3,000 people when I joined to about 67,000 people today, from less than $1 billion in revenues to now almost $40 billion in revenues. And it's been fascinating to see how we've done that. We have an interesting innovation model. We're very good at building products. We spend about $5+ billion a year in research and development. So we're great at doing the incremental line extensions or incremental innovations. But we are also not proud or too proud about what we've built. So if what we're doing is not good enough or fast enough, we'll go out and buy what we don't have or what we need. And we have done close to 150 acquisitions. And I think we're well known for being very, very good at not just acquiring companies, but retaining the talent and the brain power of who we acquire. We tend to partner extensively with technology partners, go-to-market partners, and with our customers. And key to our innovation model is collaboration. We have a very collaborative culture. It doesn't matter who you work for, it's who you work with that really matters. And so you'll see that the way we're organized today is, I wear many hats. I run the Emerging Technologies Group, but I'm also the chair of Cisco's Smart Grid board. I chair the Video Council and about 4 or 5 others. I'm also on the Development Council, which is 5 executives that run all of Cisco's research and development. So being able to collaborate is inherently important if you want to be successful at a company like Cisco. And so you have the hard organizational structures, but then you have the loose structures that run across the organizations that is centered around how you move into market adjacencies or core initiatives. Now, over the last number of years, my team and I have really become students of the innovation game. Because in my past life, actually have been CEO of 2 startup companies that I started with no venture capital, but mortgaging my house because I grew up in South Africa and there was no venture money available. But over a 7-year period, I ran 2 startups myself. I will tell you, though, that it is harder to do a startup within a big company than it is to do a startup outside of a big company. Because you have a lot of more degrees of freedom when you're a small startup. It's also harder, of course, in many aspects because you don't get to leverage the big company complementary assets. But, fighting the antibodies, as I like to call it, inside of the big organization often makes it much, much harder. And The Innovator's Dilemma is a great book that described that in spades. So when we started down this track 4 or 5 years ago, I was asked by John to, at the time I was running the enterprise voice business. I grew that from nothing to about 700 million for the company. I had 1,500 engineers working for me. And I was asked to go do 2 new startups for the company. And my first answer was, sure, I'll get right on it. And John said, no, that's all you're going to do. And I want you to take 2 people to begin with. And it's actually not John, it was John and Charlie. And I looked at Charlie, my boss at the time, and I said, Charlie, you're firing me, right? Just come out and say it. Don't beat around the bush. And he said, no, we're very serious about this. So I recognized very early on that I cannot do this myself. I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I need a lot of smart people in the room. But then I also need to find a way to leverage thousands of very, very smart people around the world to bring the ideas to the table, to find the best ideas, and then to go make those successful businesses. And that really summarizes what we do in my group. The way we continue to innovate in existing markets with existing technologies is through internal development and acquisition. We move into new markets through partnerships or acquisition, as well as into new technology areas. But in order to get into new market adjacencies, these are markets you do not participate in today. And when I say markets, it's really technology markets. So areas like video collaboration that we were not in 3 years ago. With a series of brand new innovative technologies is best done through internal venture. And this is what the smart guys at MIT will tell you. So there's many examples that prove out this point. And if you do it right, then creating a win-win with your existing businesses becomes really important. So that you first of all get to leverage the complementary assets of the company, the brand, the channel, the sales team, etc. But you also get an architectural integration point that becomes very important for long-term sustainable differentiation. Our telepresence just simply works better when it runs on a Cisco IP network than anyone else's endpoints. And that becomes a long-term sustainable differentiation because you can call anyone across a multitude of geographies with telepresence. And that's not an easy problem to solve. So finding that and ensuring that is important. Now, when we set out on this journey, really 2.5, 3 years ago, we set a goal to add $6.5 billion within 5 to 7 years to the company's top line. Now, that was a pretty audacious goal. And the way we would get there is, if you work the math backwards, is we would need about 1,000 prospects in order to fund about 20 new businesses. And that's not unlike the startup world where only 2% of ideas that gets pitched actually get funded. But what is fundamentally different is, out of the 20 ideas that we are pursuing, we expect 75%, or 3 out of 4, to actually succeed, to become successful billion-dollar profitable businesses. Now, that's much higher than the startup world, where it's typically about 10% of that 2% that get funded that actually become successful businesses. And I'm not even counting billion-dollar businesses. That's just successful businesses. So that is a very, very high bar. Now, you may ask, gosh, how are you going to do that? And the key is that I'm not just another startup outside in the big world. I do get to leverage the complementary assets of a great company. And if I can rally the rest of the company around these new businesses, then I get access to those complementary assets. And that's key, because if you have the bright new shiny thing, but you're $2 million in revenues this year, and you go to the head of sales and say, can you please invest $10 million in this $2 million business next year? He looks at you and he goes, well, hang on a second. this business over here brings 2 billion, and you want me to invest 10 million in a 2 million business? You know, if I take that 10 million and I invest it over here in this $2 billion business, guess what? I'm probably going to get a $200 million return, right? And that's the hard part, is to really ensure that you can rally people inside the company in order to get there. And I'll talk about that in a moment. So we've defined a venture framework, I'll show you in a moment here, that enables and facilitates a repeatable process to take anything from an idea to a billion-dollar business. And the first function in that framework is the find function. And we have effectively leveraged Web 2.0 technology and the wisdom of the crowd out there, and that could be Cisco employees, it could also be a broader crowd, in order to get access to the best and brightest business ideas. So the internal wiki is called iZone. This is our idea wiki. And we launched it about 2 years ago. We now have more than 2,000 billion-dollar business ideas in iZone. Now, you may say, gosh, you know, you were only looking for 1,000, right? And the answer is yes. I never thought I could get 1,000. But once we facilitated inputs from people around the company that could not just input those ideas, but others could see it, and they could, you know, vote on it, they could add to it, and suddenly people started collaborating from all over the world around these ideas, and the ideas became better and better. This has been a great source of billion-dollar business ideas for us. We've also gone external. We facilitated, not unlike what iPrize or XPrize is doing, we called ours iPrize, and it was really an open innovation model, not unlike what we've done internally with iZone, but turned inside out. Now you can imagine the debates inside of the company around, you know, loss of intellectual property, you know, and all of those issues that always come about with that. But we were able to successfully show the rest of Cisco that the reward we would get from an open innovation model would be far greater than the risk of potential intellectual property leak. And sure, there will be intellectual property leak, but again, the value what we will get of that open innovation model is far, far greater. So we've successfully run our first contest. We will do a series 2 and 3 and so forth. And we effectively had a prize of $250,000, nothing like the X prize. But the winning team got $250,000. We invest $10 million to develop that into a real business. Those founders have the potential to be a part of the company. And we've leveraged our own internal technology to facilitate the process. So we've had the, you know, iPrize wiki that people started with. We then gave them private WebEx collaboration rooms once they formed a team to go develop those ideas further. We then interviewed the finalists on telepresence, and many of them met for the first time on telepresence, you know, as we brought them together, because they were, almost without exception, the members of every team came from different countries all over the world. In fact, the winning team had 2 people from Germany and 1 person from Russia that made up the winning team. And now we have formed a new business unit around the winner, which was in fact Smart Grid. Now you may say, gosh, you know, Smart Grid is everywhere today. That's true, but 2 years ago, there was little or no talk of Smart Grid, and what the winning team really did for us was an idea as to how Cisco could play a pivotal role in the transformation of electrical grids. And I'll tell you, 2 years ago, if, you know, you asked anyone inside of Cisco, how could Cisco play a role in transforming how electrons get routed to deliver energy versus bits and bytes with pieces of information that we route around the internet today, I don't think you would have had many positive answers. But today, it's one of the hottest areas in the company. So this was sort of the quick, you know, we launched it in October of 2007. We'd had 2,500 participants from 104 countries. They came up with 1,200 additional billion-dollar business ideas. We then, you know, we picked 32 teams. That was sort of the top contenders. We, in the final round, withered it down to 12 teams, and, you know, Team AKS won the contest. We left it wide open. We had a few guidelines around, you know, it has to be an adjacency that would make sense for Cisco to get into, And we wanted it to be a viable, it needed to have the potential to become a viable billion-dollar business. And I will tell you though, not all these ideas were good ideas. I mean, there were some really bad ideas that came in as well. But that's okay, you need the really bad ones in order to get the really good ones. I think the worst one I saw was someone proposing that we go into the business of providing buried mailboxes for people's homes. Now, I don't know, but I couldn't figure that one out. Maybe you can. All right. This is the framework I alluded to earlier. We have established, and this is a very high-level view of it, but we've established an internal venture framework to take something from an idea to a successful business. So I've just talked to you a little bit about the processes we use to find billion-dollar business ideas. But we then have a second series of processes as to how we filter and shape those ideas to find the really, really good ones. And one of the most important ones we have is every quarter we have a leadership training program where we bring executives from all over the world together and we ask them to wear a general manager hat, and we give them these ideas with basic research that's been done to that point and a basic business model, and we ask them to go develop the ideas further and come back at the end of their six-month training class and tell us why we should be in this business. We have top faculty from top universities facilitating the 6-month program. I'm sorry, the 6-week program. And it is fascinating to see the result. And this, remember I said before that I cannot do this if I don't have the interest or support from the rest of the company? Well, other than it being a good intellectual exercise for these executives, we have seen time and time again, by the time they come back and they provide me that readout of why we should be in this business, they became so passionate about this new business opportunity for Cisco that they literally would call me on a weekly basis and ask me, have you funded this yet? Have you funded this yet? And they will constantly tell me, when you do, please let me know because I want to be a part of it. So immediately I have a large group of up-and-coming leaders that has participated in the creation of this business. They feel ownership, they're passionate about it. So by the time I actually fund one of these businesses, I have a lot of permission around the company to go do that. And I also have people very passionately oriented to go help me be successful. And you cannot underestimate, no matter how good your idea is, you cannot underestimate the support you need, the broader support you need outside of your sphere of influence in order to make an idea a billion-dollar business. You cannot do it without that. So how you leverage the wisdom of the crowd, how you then facilitate mass collaboration, and how you mobilize the key stakeholders, in my case, the rest of the executive team around a new business, is fundamental to success. And we live in an era where Web 2.0 technology and the internet and the connectedness of our daily lives these days enable us to do that. That was, by the way, that was not possible 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So the world has changed and we can do things now we couldn't do before. Then after the best ideas, we decide to proceed on. And by the way, by the time I decide to fund, it's not a surprise to anyone. People are sort of telling me, why haven't you done it yet? We then go into a mode where I hire a few key founders. Some come from within the company, some come from outside, depending on the business opportunity we're looking at. And we then do the final validation to understand, is this feasible? Is the timing right? Is there not a technology assumption in here that just isn't realistic? All of those basic questions, we revalidate those. And then I initiate the formation of this business unit. We rapidly develop the technology. And when I say rapidly, I mean rapidly. Just to give you a quick sample of this, the telepresence solution was developed by an average of 35 people over a 18-month period. That solution today it was one of the first 1080p solutions on the market, bar none, meaning even your set-top box, we had 1080p about a year before you could get 1080p from a Comcast or others. And we were able to deliver full 1080p high-definition video in about 2 megabits per second, which was, when we started the project, the best you could find was about 30 megabits per second. So it was more of an order of magnitude of improvement needed. And if you look at the integration of the hardware and software we've done, just to give you an idea, the amount of MIPS we run in every telepresence room is about 500 MIPS, the equivalent of just a small supercomputer of just a few years ago, with about 10 plus million lines of code to deliver that great experience. And that was done by 35 people in 18 months. And so it's truly innovative, startup-like performance because we pick only the best and the brightest. We then go to market in a very accelerated manner, meaning, and this is, by the way, this is, in my view, the most secret of the secret sauce, if you will, that makes this successful, which is how we go to market. Often startups would try to be all things to all people, day one. I have this great new innovation, and anyone that wants to use it, the answer is yes, go ahead. The problem is that in version 1.0 of anything, you can never be all things to all people. And if you try to do that, you will get, a couple of customers in every market segment, but you'll get no advocates, and you'll frustrate each one of those customers because they have a long list of features they will want from you, and each customer segment will look slightly different. So the better way to go about it is a very focused go-to-market approach where you pick, as per Jeffrey Moore's theory, which we've absolutely put in practice and it works, you pick your bowling alley, you pick your head pin and then 2 next pins, and these are typically customer segments in specific geographies. So it would be global finance in North America could be a head pin for you, for instance. And you go after that, you pick your top 10 to 15 lighthouse accounts that are must-wins. You win those accounts, they deploy it pervasively, they become great advocates, they tell everyone else in that segment, they go, and then you go to maybe the insurance industry that's adjacent to that look towards global finance as to what technologies they use, and that becomes a second pin. So that's how we go to market in a very methodical way. Again, with small teams, very focused. Year 1 and year 2 is not about revenues. It is about growth, and it is about winning those lighthouse accounts. And then after a couple of years in the market, a business either graduates, meaning it's crossed the chasm. You've got 3, 4, 5 major segments knocked over. You're well on your way to $1 billion. Telepresence is about to graduate. I can't tell you because we're about to announce our results, but it's doing very well. It's well on its way to $1 billion with very healthy margins. Or if a business is not making it, it's very important to rapidly repurpose and realign. Make sense? Okay, I've covered probably a week's long worth of theory in 5 minutes, so I apologize for that. But there's a lot under each one of these steps that we've developed in order to really get this right. All right, now just in terms of results, this is sort of a snapshot of the businesses we've created. We have created 9 businesses to date. 1 has failed, or what we've repurposed, I should say, and it really has not made its mark. It probably would have been a successful $100 million business, but that's not what we were looking for. And 8 of them, is well on their way to $1 billion. You can see, I won't go through all of them. Smart Grid is one of the newest ones we've just announced this last quarter, as well as Converged Building Systems, which is the smart energy management within buildings, within commercial and office buildings. And then there's many more in the pipeline that we're busy developing. And then lastly, Cisco as a company, John, I'm very fortunate to work for one of, I think, the greatest CEOs in the world, certainly one of the greatest ones in high tech, and that's John Chambers. He is a true visionary. I'll tell you a quick story. Even though John comes from a sales background, he has the ability to see the application of technology to what it can mean for customers better than anyone I've ever met. And when I first showed him telepresence, the first 5 minutes, we took him, I'll tell you 2 stories on telepresence. You hopefully will enjoy these. I called John up and I said, John, I've got this cool new prototype I want to show you. So it took me about 6 weeks to get a half an hour out of him. And he came over. We had 2 rooms set up back to back. He went and sat down in one and I was in the other for the first 5 minutes, I was talking to him, on telepresence, telling him about how the spatial audio works and what 1080p high def is all about, and et cetera, et cetera. And for 5 minutes, he didn't say a word. And I got really worried because, maybe he was not buying this. And so after 5 minutes, I stopped and I said, so John, what do you think? And he says, Martin, this will transform how business is done. And today, that's what our customers are telling us. They are telling us that this is transforming the way business is done. Let me give you a few data points. We have more than 400 customers today. We've deployed more than 2,600 systems worldwide. And that's outside of Cisco. We are the first and best user. And by the way, that's an important aspect. If you ever develop or build any product, you need to be the first and best user. We like to say you need to eat your own dog food. There's nothing more that gives you more credibility than eating your own dog food with your customers. We have 530 rooms deployed ourselves worldwide. We do 5,000 meetings a week around the world. We're in 124 countries. And we have about 2 million participants, Cisco employees, participating in telepresence meetings every quarter. We have saved $270 million over the last 2.5 years since we started rolling out, and we just started with 10 rooms initially, in just pure travel avoidance. We estimate that we've saved an additional 150 million in pure productivity savings, where people didn't have to spend time, schlepping bags through airports and so forth. And we believe, at least reduced our carbon footprint by 150 million cubic meters of CO2. So just to give you an idea, our run rate for travel spend has gone from 750 million down to 240 million. As a company. And we've done very limited restructuring over the last year, but our headcount has effectively been growing over that period of time. And so, that's a true testimony of how it has transformed our business. Not only that, I have the fastest corporate jet of anyone. I can be in 8 countries in one day and still be home tonight with telepresence, because that's how I meet now with customers. And it's made me a lot more productive. It's given me time back. One last quick story on telepresence, and I'm almost out of my 30 minutes here, but our previous president, George W. Bush, visited Cisco back in, it was 2005, if I recall. And we didn't have, maybe it was 2004. Yeah, I think it was 2004. We didn't even have a working prototype. Let me just put it that way. It was about 2 weeks after I showed John amongst those 2 rooms. And John said, we want to show the president this when he's on campus. He came by and spoke about education. Well, my team scrambled like you cannot believe. And we had 2 rooms set up. Of course, we had to work with his advanced team that came in, all the high security stuff they had to check out. It was 2 pre-set up rooms. But when we were I was on the one side, and the governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, was there with the president and John in the second room. And we were going to talk for about 5 minutes explaining the technology to him. Now, you got to realize, I came to the U.S. about 15 years ago. I became a U.S. citizen a month before the president's visit. All right? So it was a really interesting time for me personally. But we could not, the technology wasn't at the point where you could actually use the phone in the room to place a call. So the team devised this really high-tech device. It was a piece of cardboard that we put over the lens, because the call was actually up the previous night before the president arrived. But we had this piece of black cardboard over the lenses on my side of the room. And I had a piece of fishing line attached to this cardboard. So I was sitting in the room, and as I got the thumbs up from the door, the president is in place, I yanked that line and pulled the piece of cardboard off the cameras, and voila, we were sitting in front of the President of the United States. And that was a pretty interesting experience. We ended up having a 15-minute conversation. Arnold made a comment. He said, I've been in Hollywood all my life. This is the best experience on television I've ever seen, which was a cool comment. And then as we walked out, the president grabbed me by the arm and he said, "Martin, I hear you just became a citizen." I said, "Yes, Mr. President." He says, "Let's go take a picture." And he started walking off towards a tall flagpole. Of course, the Secret Service was scrambling because this was not part of the plan, right? He was supposed to go on stage next. So anyway, we stood up, took the picture, and he turned to me and he said, "Martin, isn't it great to be a United States citizen?" And I said, "Yes, Mr. President, it's great to be a United States citizen." So that was a cool, probably the coolest experience of my life. Now, I'll end there, but let me just go back to this, because I started with John when I put up the slide, because I'll tell you, John constantly pushed us to think outside the box. And as a company, we have desires to go from 40 billion in revenues today to 100 or more, and effectively be the best company in the world and the best company for the world. That is our ultimate vision and mission as a company. And the way we're going to do it is not just focused on our existing businesses, but also on a set of adjacencies. Those adjacencies could be something like China 3.0. We call it China 3.0, which is how we move into that geography. But it could also be smart grid, right? Or it could be how we operate more green as a company. And so we have boards and councils, which are those soft structures I mentioned, set up around these key initiatives or market adjacencies for Cisco. And these executives come together and drive these initiatives forward. We have working groups reporting into those boards and councils that, again, has employees from a variety of organizations that drive these forward on a daily basis. And, we've got 30 today. I think he added the last one just 2 weeks ago. But it's going to go to 50. He already has warned us. So, many companies have 3 to 5 top priorities. We have 30 going to 50. And the only way you can do that is to not just have the top 10 people run any company, but the top 500 going to the top 3,000. And we do it through this board and council structure. The rest of the world is starting to notice. I recently, just last week, did some interviews, was it with Forbes and the Wall Street Journal, and I think, hopefully there will be, if we're successful as this, there will be Harvard business case studies written, because this is a brand new way to manage, and it's a brand new way to involve many more people around the company to get great things done. So I'll leave you with that, and, any questions?
That's great, Martin, and I am really extremely pleased how apropos that is to the team project and the work that you're doing, and you can see the similarities clearly in what you've been doing over the last few weeks. Love to have a conversation between the students and Martin, of course, the faculty members as well.
Thanks. So my name is Shauna. I'm from Canada, background medicine, neuroscience, space studies. So my question is about the level of user satisfaction with not being able to be in the same room. Have you found that to be a concern with your customers, and how have you addressed that?
That's a great question. High definition, in particular 1080p, because even 720p, which is basic HD, is not good enough. You need to get the technology to a point where you can build a trust relationship without being in the same room. Video conferencing never really took off. People use it 6% of the time, even when they buy it, because the technology was hard to use and it just did not deliver a good experience. With telepresence, we're seeing 60% utilization rates across an 8-hour day. And I've hired 2 VPs that I've never met. I actually met them after I've hired them, one in India. And I have a long-distance trust relationship with that executive on telepresence. So it's multiple things. It is the ability to see the expression in your eyes. Or when I ask you that tough question, do you blush, do you flinch, do you sweat? Okay? The technology has to be that good. The person across the table, the virtual table, is in full life size, ultra high definition. The audio is full wideband and it's fully spatial. So the person that sits over there, their voice comes from where they sit. The person over here, voice comes from where they sit. So we fool the human brain into forgetting about the technology and truly feeling like that person is in the room. And that's what's made telepresence such a winner for us. But the other thing is, I would say 60% of any communication experience is visual in nature. Our brains are wired for visual inputs. In fact, as much as 2/3 of the cortex of the brain is dedicated to visual inputs, and the processing of visual inputs. So if you can capture not just the audio, but everything else when someone communicates with you in a meeting, and it's good enough, you can build that trust relationship, and then people feel good about it. And we're seeing people now having all-day meetings across our rooms, and they will tell us constantly that they forget about the technology after the first 5 minutes, and it feels like they were in the same room. I think one of the areas, if I look out into the future, because of climate change, we have to all think fundamentally differently about how we work, live, play, and learn. And I think these types of technologies that can truly bring transformational experiences, not just to make us more productive, but in the process help us address some of the greatest challenges the world may face in the future, to me is really, really exciting. And I think this is just, the meeting experience and the business relationship is just one experience we can transform through technology.
Luke Hutchison, PhD candidate in computer science at MIT. I'm just wondering what your opinion is on how large companies can avoid getting bogged down in their own inertia. So, companies like Google are dealing with this right now as they sort of reach this critical point. What is Cisco doing to avoid the problems that come from that?
Oh, that's a big one, because I think John would always tell you that no company becomes a great company until they've been shaken to their core. It happened with GE. Jack Welch will tell you that. It happened with Cisco. The dot-com bust in 2001 knocked us on our rear, but we got right back up, and that really gave us the identity we have today. And it also made us realize how, not to take anything away from Google, but you have to have a repeatable process and a sustainable differentiation in anything and everything you do. And I think Google, as a very young company, is going through that right now. They're still trying to find who they really are, what their core is, and how they're going to expand from that in order to sustain growth. Because it's all about sustainable growth. A monolithic business can never give you sustainable growth, because every business goes through a life cycle of pre-chasm, post-chasm, high growth, then it matures, right? And you need additional waves of businesses to come in that's going to keep your company growing. And that's effectively what we've done and what we've went through since 2001. And it's worked for us. If you think back of 2001, the biggest fundamental change we've made was we went down this path of creating what we called advanced technologies. Our entry into voice over IP, wireless, security were all examples of that. And these were all new upcoming businesses that created high growth for us, and not just helped us recover, but also helped our core business recover, and then gave us additional growth over time.
Neil Thompson, I'm a PhD student at the High School of Business at Berkeley. And my question is, as you launch these new enterprises, what is your relationship like with the other business units, where many of the people you're probably choosing to lead them are probably also their best and brightest?
That's always an interesting dilemma. But I'm very fortunate to work with an excellent leadership team at Cisco that realize, and the really good ones realize, that people need to continue to be challenged and get new opportunities. And so if a key leader has been in a role for 3, 4, 5 years, and you don't get them a new challenge, they will end up leaving, or they'll get frustrated. And so we have a lot of permission around the company to give people additional career opportunities. I personally will tell you that I have on multiple occasions paid some of my direct reports bigger bonuses than what I have earned, because I thought they were worth it. My boss probably didn't at the time. But I have no problem with someone becoming a peer that today, for instance, is working for me. And hiring people that are much smarter than me is also, I'm very, very comfortable with that. Because at the end of the day, it's not about me, it's about my team and what we can do together. So that attitude, first of all, attract people. That mindset, people see that. I have people that worked for me, left, worked somewhere else for 2, 3 years, and now is working for me again as I form some of these new startups. And just when people feel that, one, you're going to support them in terms of their growth, and two, you're going to If they want to go do something else, they have the permission to go do that. In fact, she will tell you at my 6 months ago, one of my all-hands meetings, I told my entire staff, I had the executives in the front row, their eyes went like this when I said this. I said to the engineers, I said, look, if you don't enjoy what you're working on today, you need to go find another job. Because you are frustrated and you're not bringing the value you can bring to this team. You know, and just me saying that, giving everyone permission to know that I understand they're here out of their own free will and that we're going to support them if they want to go do something else because one day they may come back. It's that kind of culture that I think is very important to foster in any organization. But it is sometimes, you know, there's people that will get a little bit tweaked if you take their top performer or their top executive. But at the end of the day, people understand and they do what's right for the business.
Okay, one last question from Jose.
My name is Jose. I come from Venezuela, and I work on energy issues. And my question is about energy. Mm-hmm. A few weeks ago, we had Bob Metcalf here talking about going from internet to internet. And he said that this was the most fundamental change that we could see, and also that energy should be free like internet. So you were talking about the smart grid. So what is your view about the internet and a free energy supply system for the whole planet? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area, of course, that we've gotten really, really excited about the last 2 years. I not only coach or chair the Smart Grid Board, but I also have a business unit that's actually building a big solution in the space. I will just tell you from Cisco's point of view, we think this opportunity is as big or bigger than the internet for our company.
Listen to him, huh?
It is huge. Just a couple data points. There are 100 times more homes connected to grids, electrical grids, than there are computers connected to the internet today. Wow. So we just need to connect 1%, and it'll be as big as the internet, theoretically, all right? The other thing that's really fascinating is energy is what makes the world go around. You know, in the modern world, I mean, even in the undeveloped world, right, energy, whether it's from a fire to cook or whatever the case is, right, it's a basic need. And so, thirdly, there has been little to no innovation in this space. Fourthly, the world is running out of energy. You know, the population growth and everything around that is demanding, putting much, much greater demands. And because for 50 years the grid fundamentally didn't evolve, it's running out of capacity. And when you look at utilities, you know, 80% of their cost goes in when they hit those peaks. That is about 5% of the time. And they incur massive costs when they hit those peaks. So on top of that, and that's already happening today, on top of that, you've got all these new consumers of energy, whether it's electric cars, on, and you've got new sources of supply, you know, whether it's solar, wind, turbine, you know, thermal, it's geothermal, et cetera. And so how you actually match the needs or the demands to the supply is going to require a very sophisticated network to route electrons from the right source to the right destination. Sounds a lot like routing bits and bytes from the right source to the right destination. In fact, I had a meeting with Southern Cal Edison last week, their head of technology, and he was talking about how they're starting to build rings that are self-healing in the grid. And if a specific ground fault occurs, they can, in basically milliseconds, beat the breakers to isolate that segment and reform the ring. Sounds a lot like, you know, routing protocols and how we built the internet. So there's a ton of analogy. It's a very big problem. It's here to stay. And today, you know, you have all these small networks, if you will, or small pieces of grids. You know, in the US, there's more than 30,000 utilities, just to give you an idea, electric utilities. And so those things will all become connected as they need to tap into alternative sources of energy and so forth. So I can go on and on, but I will just say this is a very big opportunity. It's here to stay. We are going to play a very, very big part of it in 3 areas. Think of a control network that's going to route those electrons. That will be parallel to the actual grid, you know, the wires that carry the electricity. That's a brand new network that will get built out and will extend into every home. I believe a second broadband connection into every home. I can go into why, but basically, if your 17-year-old runs your home network, you understand why. You need a separate connection, right? And then secondly, in the home, there's a whole big market there for in-home energy management. We're working with partners like GE and others. And then in building, meaning office and commercial buildings, we already have a solution for that as to how you connect all of your building systems to the in-building network. And then in the future, as grids become smarter and they can signal prices to buildings and homes, that system needs to automatically respond to your policies and do different things at different times of the day based on the pricing signals they get from the grid. So, the whole automation of electrical distribution, the management of that, and then, making the world a greener place overall is massive. One last data point. Google, NetApps, Walgreens are all customers of ours for the in-building energy systems. And in all cases, just after tying their building systems together, their air conditioning, lighting, etc., they are immediately seeing a 25% reduction in energy use across those buildings, just applying policies and making these systems talk to each other. So, this is a green field. There's so much opportunity we're really excited about.
Marthin, thank you so very much.
Welcome. Thanks, Peter.